Welcome to The Midnight Secrets. The Whispering Pines. Deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains lies a forest shrouded in mystery and dread. Locals call it Whispering Pines, a name born from the eerie sounds that emanate from the towering trees. For generations, the people of the nearby town have avoided the forest, passing down tales of strange disappearances and unsettling phenomena that defy explanation. The origins of Whispering Pine's sinister reputation date back to the 1800s, when a group of settlers embarked on a journey westward. The group consisted of families seeking new lives on the frontier, drawn by the promise of untamed land and endless possibilities. They set up camp on the edge of the forest, planning to rest for the night before continuing their journey at dawn. As darkness fell, a thick fog rolled in, obscuring the moon and stars. The forest seemed to come alive with strange noises, rustling leaves, distant footsteps, and, most disturbingly, whispers. The settlers dismissed the sounds as the wind playing tricks on their ears, but an unease settled over the camp. Despite the growing tension, they bedded down for the night. By morning, the camp was eerily silent. A hunter from a nearby village who stumbled upon the site found the settlers' wagons intact, their supplies untouched, and food still simmering over dying embers. Yet there was no sign of the settlers themselves. Their footprints led into the forest, but the trail abruptly ended at the edge of a dense grove of pine trees. The hunter searched the area, calling out, but was met with only the whispers of the wind. Over the years, more stories emerged. Hikers and adventurers who dared to enter Whispering Pines reported hearing faint voices, as if the trees were speaking in a language only they understood. Some claimed to hear their own names called out from the depths of the forest, while others described feeling an inexplicable compulsion to venture deeper into the woods, drawn by the promise of uncovering its secrets. Those who ventured too far often did not return. The few who managed to escape described a sensation of being watched, of unseen eyes following their every move. Some spoke of seeing shadowy figures moving between the trees, always just out of sight. And then there were the whispers, constant, insistent, growing louder the closer they got to the heart of the forest. One particularly harrowing account came from a group of teenagers who, on a dare, decided to spend the night in Whispering Pines. As they huddled around a fire, they heard the whispers start, soft at first, then growing louder and more urgent. The trees seemed to close in around them, the shadows lengthening and darkening. One of the teenagers, unable to bear the voices any longer, ran into the forest. His friends chased after him, but he disappeared into the fog, his screams echoing through the trees. The search for the boy lasted for days, but no trace of him was ever found. The surviving teenagers were left traumatized, unable to explain what had happened. They spoke of the overwhelming feeling of dread that had gripped them, of the voices that had filled their heads with thoughts that weren't their own. To this day, Whispering Pines remains a place of fear and fascination. The whispers continue, luring the curious and the foolhardy into the depths of the forest, where the trees keep their secrets, and the lost souls of the past whisper warnings to those who dare to listen. The Silent Clearing. In the shadowy depths of the Pacific Northwest, where the forests are thick with ancient trees and undergrowth, lies a place that few have seen and even fewer have lived to tell about. The locals refer to it simply as the Silent Clearing, a patch of land deep within the woods where the natural world falls eerily silent, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. The clearing has a dark history, one that stretches back to the early days of the fur trade. In the late 1700s, the region was a wild, untamed land, home to fierce rivalries between fur trappers and traders. The competition for valuable pelts was fierce, leading to bloody confrontations in the dense, remote forests. One such confrontation would leave a permanent scar on the land. According to legend, a group of trappers set up camp in the clearing, unaware that they were trespassing on the territory of a rival group. The night was cold and still, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the occasional call of a night bird. But as dawn approached, the silence grew oppressive, a thick, unnatural quiet that seemed to smother the camp. Without warning, the rival trappers attacked. The assault was swift and brutal, leaving no survivors. The bodies of the fallen were left where they lay, their blood soaking into the earth. The rival group disappeared into the forest, leaving behind nothing but the echo of violence. When the trapper's employer arrived days later, he found the camp deserted, the clearing unnaturally quiet. There were no animals, no birds, not even the wind rustling through the trees. The bodies of the trappers lay where they had fallen, but something about the scene was profoundly wrong. The corpses had not decayed, despite the passage of time. Their faces were frozen in expressions of terror, their eyes wide open as if they had seen something unimaginable in their final moments. The employer and his men quickly buried the bodies and left the clearing, but the silence followed them, hanging heavy in the air. As they made their way back through the forest, they began to hear strange noises, soft whispers, distant cries, the sound of footsteps just behind them. None dared to speak of it, but all felt the same growing dread. In the years that followed, the silent clearing became a place of legend. Hunters and trappers who ventured into the area reported an eerie stillness, as if the forest had been drained of life. Some described seeing the spirits of the fallen trappers, their ghostly forms wandering the clearing, endlessly reliving their final moments. Others told of a curse that had settled over the land, a curse that demanded blood. Those who spent the night in the clearing often woke to find strange, inexplicable marks on their bodies, scratches, bruises, and, most disturbingly, fresh bloodstains on the ground. There were no signs of an intruder, no tracks leading in or out of the clearing. It was as if the land itself had reached out to claim them. In more recent times, the silent clearing has become a subject of fascination for paranormal investigators and thrill seekers. Some come seeking proof of the supernatural, armed with cameras and recording devices. Most leave disappointed, their equipment failing to capture the eerie phenomena described by the locals. But a few, those who dare to stay overnight, return with stories that defy explanation. One such investigator, a seasoned paranormal researcher, described his experience in the silent clearing as the most terrifying of his career. He spent the night alone, hoping to capture evidence of the ghostly apparitions that were said to haunt the area. As night fell, the silence grew unbearable. The forest around him seemed to press in, the trees looming like silent sentinels. Around midnight, the investigator heard it, the faint sound of footsteps, followed by the low murmur of voices. He quickly realized that the voices were speaking in an unfamiliar language, one that he couldn't place. He felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of fear, as if he was being watched by unseen eyes. His equipment failed to capture anything, the batteries drained within minutes. As he hurried to pack up and leave, he noticed something on the ground, a fresh bloodstain, seeping into the earth. To this day, the silent clearing remains a place of fear and superstition. The locals avoid it, and those who venture in do so at their own risk. The forest remembers the violence that took place there, and it demands payment in blood, a debt that can never be repaid. The Hollow Oak. In the heart of the Black Forest, where the trees are ancient and the air thick with centuries of history, there stands an oak tree unlike any other. The locals call it the Hollow Oak, a name that only hints at the dark secrets hidden within its twisted trunk. The tree has stood for centuries, its roots tangled deep in the earth, its branches reaching high into the sky like gnarled fingers grasping for the heavens. The story of the Hollow Oak begins in the 16th century, during a time when fear and superstition ruled the land. The Black Forest was a place of mystery, its dense woods and hidden valleys home to creatures of myth and legend. It was also a place where the old ways clashed with the new, where the fear of witchcraft led to brutal persecutions and executions. One such tale involves a woman named Greta, who lived in a small village on the edge of the forest. Greta was a healer, known for her knowledge of herbs and potions. She was respected by some, but feared by others, for her skills were often seen as unnatural, a sign of dark powers. Rumors began to spread that Greta was a witch, that she had made a pact with the devil in exchange for her abilities. When crops failed and livestock died, the villagers needed someone to blame. They accused Greta of casting curses and using her dark magic to bring misfortune upon them. Despite her pleas of innocence, the villagers were deaf to her cries. They dragged her from her home, and in a frenzied mob, they decided her fate. The villagers led Greta into the Black Forest, to a place where the hollow oak stood like a sentinel. They tied her to the tree, her wrists bound with rough ropes, and began their grim work. The leader of the mob, a man driven by fear and hatred, proclaimed that Greta would be executed for her crimes. They built a pyre at the base of the tree, intending to burn her alive. But before the flames could be lit, the sky darkened, and a sudden storm rolled in. The wind howled through the trees, and the villagers felt a chill in the air, as if the very forest was rebelling against their actions. As they hesitated, a voice, cold and menacing, echoed through the clearing. It was Greta, her eyes filled with a terrible fury. She cursed the villagers, vowing that her spirit would never rest, that she would haunt them and their descendants for all eternity. In a panic, the villagers abandoned their plan. They untied Greta and, in their desperation, forced her into the hollow of the oak tree. They sealed the opening with stones and mud, trapping her inside. As the storm raged on, they fled, leaving Greta to die alone, entombed within the tree. The next morning, the storm had passed, but the hollow oak remained. The villagers returned, expecting to find Greta's lifeless body, but when they removed the stones, they found the hollow empty. There was no sign of Greta, no trace of her existence. The tree had swallowed her whole, and with her, it had taken something of the darkness that had been unleashed that night. In the years that followed, the hollow oak became a place of fear and superstition. The villagers avoided it, knowing that something unnatural had taken root within its trunk. Strange things began to happen, animals refused to go near the tree, and those who did often fell ill or died shortly afterward. Children who wandered too close claimed to hear a woman's voice, whispering curses and promises of vengeance. As time passed, the village itself faded into obscurity, but the hollow oak remained. Travelers who passed through the Black Forest spoke of the tree, of the strange sensations they felt when near it. Some described feeling an icy hand grip them as they touched the bark, while others claimed to see shadowy figures flitting through the trees, always just out of reach. One particularly chilling account comes from a group of woodcutters who were hired to clear a section of the forest. They came upon the hollow oak and decided to cut it down, not knowing the dark history that clung to the tree like a shroud. As they began to chop, the wind picked up, howling through the forest. The tree seemed to bleed as they struck it, a dark sap oozing from the wounds they inflicted. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shook, and the men were thrown to the ground. The hollow oak groaned, the sound like that of a dying creature. The woodcutters fled, abandoning their tools, and when they returned later with reinforcements, they found the tree untouched, as if their axes had never made contact. But the ground around the tree was different, freshly disturbed, as if something had recently clawed its way out from beneath the earth. The hollow oak still stands today, a silent witness to the dark deeds of the past. Those who venture near speak of the unease that settles over them, of the whispers that seem to come from within the tree itself. They say that Greta's spirit still lingers, trapped within the oak, waiting for the day when she can finally have her revenge.